How can determination be leveraged to create opportunity and real impact in local communities? On today's Muslim Changemaker series, we'll explore how one success story meant taking responsibility for our community and for our neighbors. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm your host, Taha Ghayur, and you're watching Canada Today broadcast on Muslim Network TV. And I'm excited to chat today with our guest who is very popular in Milton area. Milton is a western suburb of Toronto, those of you who are not aware. And we're talking today with Councillor Zeeshan Hamid. Zeeshan is an inspiring combination of politics, all things tech, and many other things that you're going to discover today. An elected Milton official, Zeeshan, or Z, as many people call him, wears many hats. He's an avid techie. He's a public speaker. He's a photographer, and he's a volunteer. After serving twice as a Milton Town Councillor since 2010, he was elected as Ward 4's regional councillor with majority support a couple of years ago. Councillor Zeeshan is also the founder of many initiatives. He served as the director on the Milton Public Library Board and Milton Transit Advisory Committee. He's also a former co-chair of Milton Economic Development. Currently, he chairs Milton Budget Committee, and he's also a board member at Halton Healthcare Services and Halton Community Housing Corporation. Well, so happy to see you, Zeeshan, Councillor Zeeshan Hamid, on Canada Today. Thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, I like your COVID-19 look, mashallah. That's beautiful. So let's get started. Mashallah, you have an amazing, successful career. In fact, you had one before even becoming a counselor, and you come from a tech industry, and you're part of lots of course boards in Halton region and Milton region. So we wanted to start off by asking you what happened. How did you get into politics? What changed, and was it something that you aspired to all your life, or was it accidental? Because I remember you had an interesting story to share a few years, actually good 5-6 years back, at a conference. You were chairing a panel, and you were talking about how you got into politics, and I found that quite intriguing. So please share with our viewers, your journey to politics.
And it seems like there's some weird internet issues going on, but I'm back to my, tech nerd look during COVID-19, as you can see, out of politician look. But it's interesting. I never actually thought I was going to be in politics. And what happened was I worked for Microsoft about 12, 13 years ago. And it's just a simple story. There was a train track in front of my house, not in front of my house, but very close to my house that I had to cross to get home. And these CN trails can be huge. They would literally take 10 minutes to pass. And I would sit there every other day for 10 minutes waiting for the train to pass. And I got so upset about the fact that there was no bridge or underpass and we had to wait at the train crossing that I got my neighbors organized to do a petition, met a bunch of politicians about it, finally got that approved. And that was my entrance into politics. I never thought I was going to be in politics at all. So somehow one thing led to another, and next thing I knew, I was elected.
And here you are 10 years, a decade later,
I know.
mashallah, serving as a regional councillor. It's amazing.
Yeah, time flies.
Very interesting. And of course, now 3 times, of course, right? So that's phenomenal. Well, so how do you balance your passion projects, your community projects, with this political leadership that you, a big major role that you play as a councillor?
Yeah, to my wife's annoyance, I just don't sleep. I don't sleep much at all. It's gonna catch up to me one day, but it hasn't been working so far. So far, so good.
Oh man, you need to read, and I know you're a big reader too. We'll talk about it. But Why We Sleep. There are a lot of amazing good books on this topic, but more specifically, there's a book that maybe you want to read up on and see why sleep is so critical. And believe me, I'm on the same in the same boat. I have the same problem. You know, how do you
Yeah,
balance time? The only thing I can give up is sleep. So
I get the theory. I make sure my kids get enough sleep, but when it comes to myself, it always makes me feel like I'm missing something. So eventually, I'll slow down, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
wow, that's the key to productivity. Well, that we learn, we, guys, you girls, you learned something new today from Zeeshan Hamid.
Oh
So
no, no, no! Do not copy that. Actually, do not do what I do. Not many people can survive this. It's not good for your health.
thank you for clarifying that. Well, speaking of balance, let's talk about family and kids. Mashallah, you have 6 children. How do you balance family life with politics? And again, sleep probably has to do with it, something to do with it. But you know, you are probably out and about a lot of the evenings, most of the evenings and weekends. How do you juggle family commitments? And definitely, you're a mashallah family man. You can see from these photos. How do you balance this?
Yeah, all jokes aside, my wife and I are both driven by our calendars, so we both make sure that we update our calendars pretty religiously, including personal engagements. And it seems a little weird that the calendar might say to pick up groceries or it might say to go to your son's hockey game. But I really do need to be driven by calendar. And the other things, again, in all seriousness, is prioritization. You have to be very hardcore about prioritizing things. So, always been a dad. Being a dad comes first, family comes first, and I've not always done it successfully. Sometimes you sacrifice family life a little bit, but it's not something I plan to do. It's something that I find myself doing, and then I have to course correct and then prioritize family up again, and then community and then work. So honestly, it's about family, community, service. As long as those three things are there in that order, you'll be okay.
Oh, that's beautiful. Is your family or any of your family members or children involved in any of the initiative that you're part of, or is that something you encourage them to be part of? I mean, because as people involved in the community, always helps to have, of course, children or family members involved in some capacity. In this way, you get to spend some quality time with them, but at the same time, you're also mentoring them. You're also, sort of preparing them for something better, in terms of skill development as well as leadership opportunities.
Yeah, they're all at different stages and they have different interests. So during the election campaign, everyone gets involved. Well, my wife very heavily, but the kids as well. But outside of election campaigns, it's generally my initiative, and sometimes they'll volunteer for it. Sometimes it depends on where they are in school. I have two daughters in university. One is starting university in September, so
MashaAllah.
a son in grade 11. So it really depends on what's going on in their lives as well.
Mm.
But they do volunteer a lot, not just with my initiative, but with on their own as well. Especially one of my daughters who's been very involved in mental health initiatives and stuff, which outside of what I do, so on her own completely, which is pretty good to see.
Oh, beautiful. That's great. So, a lot of our audience probably wouldn't know that you're involved with a lot of youth mentoring initiatives by yourself. And for example, your annual bowling fundraiser contributes about $10,000 yearly to support the.
Yeah, it didn't happen this year, unfortunately, because of COVID. But last year we went up to 15,000, and I was hoping to get to 20,000 this
Wow.
year, but we got exactly $0. So I'll have to figure out what to do about it this year.
Yeah. Of course, and that's unfortunate. I mean, unfortunately, COVID-19 has really thrown so many of us off, and our plans are, unfortunately, completely, thrown out of the window. But
Yeah, I'm a believer there's always a silver lining, so I think something good will come out of it. I think what's going to happen is that we'll find a way to work more virtually. We'll find a way to do things in a more sustainable way. One of the things a lot of nonprofits I'm involved in are looking at now is to stop relying on massive fundraisers once or twice a year and start building a more sustained revenue source. So you have membership, you have
mm,
people donating every month as opposed to one massive gala. So I think a good might come out of it yet.
of course, good point. Well, how has your experience been with all these youth mentorship type of projects? I mean, what drives you to do some of this youth mentorship and youth development type of projects? Because you yourself are involved in some of these youth mentorship programs.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps me young. I have kids of my own, so they have their own mentors. So I think that helps as well.
Mm,
But more importantly, I had a lot of mentors growing up. Throughout my life, as I look at different milestones in my life or different, whenever I face a different path, and I see, I could have gone this way, but I went this way because of that person's guidance or because of somebody else's mentoring, and now I do the same thing. And I often end up seeing myself in a lot of kids. So I look at people who are struggling with some decisions, and I can look back and say, you know what, I had a similar issue when I was your age, and I can let me talk to you about it.
mm.
So I'm not actually only involved in youth, and I'm not most involved in youth. There are other people who are a lot more involved than I am, but it's something I really enjoy doing, especially when you see the result a few years down. It's the most amazing, the most rewarding thing you can ever do.
That's beautiful. That's great to hear. You just talked about, and you just mentioned about mentors, something about mentors yourself, having mentors yourself. So, you are now in a position to give back and guide young people, in various roles and capacities. Who were there for you when you were either entering politics or even before, when you were getting into, of course, your tech career, or even just being raised, in a family of loving parents? Who are some of the people whom you looked up to and who had an impact on your life as mentors in your lives?
Yeah, honestly, man, I can't even mention everybody. Talk about privilege. I come, alhamdulillah, from a family that really values education. So I had a lot of cousins around me that are all highly educated, highly successful that I could look up to. I was very fortunate to have good teachers that guided me along the way. That whenever I started to veer from the path, they caught me back, brought me back. And if I mean, I honestly cannot pick one person out, living or dead, but one person whose life has inspired me a lot lately in the last 2 years or so, that I've been reading up a lot about him is Malcolm X.
Mhm.
For really no reason, but because of the obstacles he had, because of the changes he went through. And one of the things his life has taught me is that as long as you're sincere and you're searching for the truth sincerely, the truth has a way of finding you no matter which environment you're in. And that's been really, really inspiring. So I'm trying to learn more and more about him.
Oh, beautiful. That's very interesting. And we'll maybe come back to it a bit later, but this is interesting. So, you deal with all sorts of people from all walks of life, of course. Being a regional coordinator, a regional counselor, I'm wondering what has been your experience seeing over the past decades, 1 decade, with your involvement in politics. What has been? How do you see the growth and maturity of the Muslim community in politics in Canada? Um, how have they evolved over the past 10 years, and where do you see this going?
So on a really positive note, I know that Muslim community has gotten involved in voting. Because I know my first election, it was a struggle, especially to get people to vote municipally. I mean, I
Mm,
almost didn't count on Muslim votes. That said, a lot of Muslim votes did come out, but it was as you know, 2010 timeframe municipal election. It wasn't really something that the
yeah.
community really looked up to. They were involved federally somewhat, but now we're at a point where Muslim communities are forced to be reckoned with, where you can see the change in conversations. Whereas if you look at some of the political statements, especially from our more conservative politicians 20 years ago towards the Muslim community, that has evolved and shifted quite significantly because
Mm,
they know that in a lot of key ridings, they can't win without supportive communities. So they don't no longer play identity politics or the kind of games they used to play before. And that has been a huge, huge shift. So people have gotten more political maturity. They have gotten involved in voting, and I couldn't be happier about that. That's been really amazing change.
oh, that is very, very true. And I mean, thanks to a lot of the work of organizations, of course, like the Canadian Muslim Vote, and and other, depending on what region of Canada you're in, others civic engagement groups. Alhamdulillah, we are at a point where, as you said, not only we have matured politically, but there's quite a bit of good political organizing happening now that is propelling
Absolutely.
our community to
So,
take.
I mean, if you go back 20 years, when I was in university, a big discussion was whether voting was halal or not, right? There was a big group that's not as significant anymore
Yeah.
that had a belief that voting is an act of kufr almost.
Mm,
So we've moved way past that, and
mm,
that's been really positive because we live in a society where we're impacted by political decisions that are made. So either you're on the table or you're at the table, and I prefer
yeah,
to be at the table making decisions.
that's true. That's great. Um, well, talking about engagement. You have successfully raised funds for various organizations. Your work, has gone beyond the Muslim community, of course, being a counselor. And you have, for instance, raised 150K for refugees, bringing refugees in Milton, sponsoring refugees basically in Milton area. And you have also helped struggling families in your region. Um, so you have been very involved in, the wider civic engagement space all this time. Uh, when it comes to Muslim community, we still have, of course, our struggles. We still are, navigating our way. What advice do you have for young people in particular, and even adults, young adults, when it comes to widening our net and our scope and our vision, when it comes to giving back to our community, our society, our neighborhoods, and giving back to Canada? What are some of the things that you think they should be doing and considering based on your own path that you have taken?
Yeah, this is going back like long, long time ago. Probably my high school days. I was at a Jummah khutbah once, and the khatib was talking about how if, as a Muslim, you live on a street, your neighbors should celebrate that you live on a street because the entire street will be better off. Now they just know it. They know that street will be cleaner. They know that if neighbors have an issue, you'll be there to help them out. And I've always kind of gone back to that. It wasn't something I came up with. It was something at the khutbah, but it's always gone back to that as a guiding principle. So if I'm somewhere, people who are interacting with me, people who live around me, people who live on my street, people who live in my neighborhood, they should be better off because I'm there. And I think that should be a general philosophy for Muslims as well, because the kind of rights neighbors have in our religion are, I mean, they're almost at a point where our prophet was worried that neighbors will start inheriting from us, right? So we really need to have that mindset and that attitude, and that's the single biggest advice I can give to young people. Don't worry about politics. Don't worry about becoming a politician. Just be involved in the community in whatever capacity you like. So if you enjoy working with people, perhaps you can mentor people. If you are a technical person, perhaps you can help in the technical front. If you just like volunteering, perhaps you can just go out and clean up a park. So
Mm,
if you just find where you can give back and you can make the community better, success just comes to you, and you'll naturally find yourself in leadership roles in different areas in whatever area you're interested in. And then if you're interested in politics, you'll naturally find yourself in leadership role in politics. If you're interested in community building, you'll find yourself in leadership roles in community building. So
mm,
my advice is always not to start off with with achievements. Start off with giving back, and achievements just come to you naturally.
mm. That's very interesting. I mean, organic involvement and organic growth and organic leadership is the key. So that's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Um, you know, you have been involved in this, of course, field now for 10 years, and you are a proud Canadian Muslim, and you don't, you have no qualms about your identity being a Muslim. What are some of the pitfalls and as well as highlights, I would say, in your political journey that you face so far? And as a Muslim entering into politics, working in politics, as a counselor, what are some of the positives as well as negatives that you faced?
So Milton wasn't as diverse 10 years ago than it is today. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to me and told me that interacting with me, like I was the first Muslim that they ever interacted with. And it kind of changes the view, because if you've only learned about, an ethnic group or a religious group through media or through movies, you have a
Mm,
very different picture of them until you interact with them. So that's been a blessing.
yeah.
On the negative front, you always have people who basically, uh, you know, hate is a strong word, who basically won't like you because of the label they assign to you or because of the label you carry. And
Mm,
honestly, I don't have a problem with that, because I tend to just ignore them and think that, one day, hopefully I'll win them over, or one day they'll come around. They'll see the error of their ways. They'll see that, perhaps they have certain biases that are unfair, and they'll get past it. But honestly, they won't get past it unless people like you and I stay involved and carry your identity proudly. So it's just part of who I am, and I've never tried to hide who I am. It is what it is.
mm. So I wonder if you ever faced an incidence of Islamophobia of any sort, any hate specifically targeting you because of your faith and your identity?
Yeah. I have a ton of emails to share. But I mean, the one story is there was, and this is going back a while ago. There was a lady, and I've shared this story before in certain other venues, and she was just relentless in attacking me or criticizing me. And one day I asked her out. I'm like, what, let's just meet for coffee. She was a much older lady, and we were having coffee, and I said, what, listen. So and so, whatever her name was. So I just want to understand, right? What's your issue? Because you can see if you present your issue as if you have an issue with my policy or my voting record, but I've noticed that you single only me out. Not everyone else has voted that way, or not everyone else with that policy. And her answer was, and I always found it profound. Her answer was that she looked at me and she said, "My problem with you is that you have normalized Muslims in Milton." And I was like,
Whoa.
"Huh, you're right. I have. I mean, if I've done that, that's pretty awesome. I'll take some credit for it. Thank you for
Wow.
pointing it out." So you always have people like that who basically, their life was a certain way, and the people around them saw people who were different from them a certain way, and the fact that those people are no longer disliked or hated, or they're becoming part of the overall community, it's something that there's a very, very, very minute, small number of people who are always unhappy about it. And you
Hmm.
know what? What can you do? There'll always be some that you just have to ignore.
Well, I mean, definitely. I mean, speaking of credit, I think one of the things to definitely it's important to acknowledge is the fact that your presence in the, of course, being there as a counselor now for a decade, has inspired others to run for these roles. And in fact, if I remember correctly, last municipal election you had other Muslims running against you, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that
Um,
always happens. I don't mind that.
so that's great. Diversity is something that needs to be celebrated regardless who's running, and the fact that now you have a new counselor, of course, of another racialized from a racialized minority who happens to be Muslim, Samir Ali, and it's good to see that there are others now, um, there to truly represent the community based on, of course, the demographics of the community and of the writings and of our cities, basically. So this is, I think, a very positive thing. And correct me if I'm wrong. You are probably one of the first Muslim counselors, probably in the Greater Toronto area. I know there is one, Khalid Usman, if I remember
Khalid Usman was there.
correctly.
He's back now,
Yes.
but I believe he lost the election in 2010. So between 2010 and the 2018 election, for 8 years, uh, for the longest time, I was the only one.
Yeah.
But I believe I'm probably the only one at the regional level, if I'm correct.
Hmm.
So we're and you nailed it. What it is that the boards and committees and leadership organization, they should reflect the community. And
Exactly.
it's not just ethnicity, it's not just religion. Take gender, right? So the
Yep.
fact that councils, by and large, I mean, Misaga is an exception, but by and large, they're mostly male. That's a
Mm.
problem because my life experience is different from half the population. And if
Yes.
their voices are not at the table, we miss out on a lot of things. So we're well intentioned. I mean, as a man, I'm well intentioned and I like to do the right thing, but my life experience is just different. I haven't experienced
Mm.
things that a lot of women have. And their voices need to be on the table as well. Similarly, if you live in a community that's very diverse, you need those diverse voices on the table because their life experiences are different.
Mm.
I mean, I was just talking to someone about it like a few hours ago today, where if you look at police boards, for example, it's something I mentioned on Facebook that someone asked me about. If you look at most police boards, they're typically, even in diverse communities, mostly white male, and that's not a racist statement to make. That's just a factual
Mhm.
statement. Now, what ends up happening is, if you think of carding, that was a big controversy a few years ago. That was a very common policing practice, by the way,
Mhm.
where service after service find out that carding is primarily done to minority males, right? Black males and brown males and Sikh males, like ethnic males. If you're not an ethnic male, you see that issue very differently because you're like, what's the big deal? If you're not doing anything,
Okay, I think we seem to have a lag there. Let's see if you can come back on.
boom, I'm back. Yeah, it's just the internet, right?
Okay.
I was
Okay.
saying that if you don't
Yeah.
have those ethnic voices at the table, then you
Mm.
don't have someone raising their life experience. You see the same thing, you see it very differently.
Very
So we
important.
do need to solve the problem at the root level and make sure that we collect people from every single background when it comes to these leadership roles. We train them, we groom them, we get them ready, and not just ethnic background, religious background, as well as gender.
Excellent. Very good. Thanks for sharing that. One of the things that people like about you in the Milton region or Milton area is the fact that you're very accessible to your residents. I know that you hold weekly town halls now virtually. You're answering questions on your own YouTube channel, which is great. A live political chat with Councillor Zeeshan Hamid. How has the feedback been to now this new reality that we're all facing, virtual town halls?
It's been really helpful. So I mean, I'm doing it on YouTube and Facebook. I get a lot more interaction on Facebook than YouTube. I'm trying to
Mm,
move people to YouTube because uh, there's a book, but most of the interaction right now comes from
yeah.
Facebook. And it's been really helpful because people have concerns, they have questions, and they're able to just reach out and ask them. What I noticed during COVID-19 is if you look at my Facebook page, it's one of the largest, I've once the largest following among any local politicians anywhere, really. And it happened during COVID-19, where I think
Mm,
people realized that you're no longer able to reach out to people. Local media doesn't have presence in a lot of communities. We're fortunate in Milton, we have local media presence, but a lot of communities don't. And
mm,
so online becomes the only way of reaching out and getting in touch with people who make decisions that impact your life. So I think it's critically important, and it's something I consider part of my job. So when I'm on Facebook, when I'm on Twitter, when I'm checking email, when I'm responding to text or WhatsApp messages, I consider it a job requirement, not something I'm doing extra.
okay. Well, let's switch things up a little bit and talk about your business. A lot of people probably don't know that you come from a very successful tech industry background. You have, established some very successful platforms, multi-billion-dollar platforms for some giants and giant corporations out there. Tell us a little bit about your journey in the corporate world itself. What did you do before you became Councillor Zeeshan Hamid? What were some of the achievements you had there and things that you enjoyed, and now to a new venture that we have come to know about? So, can you share a little bit
Yeah,
more
I
about
noticed that you
where
have the thing up, and if you notice, the art on the cover page actually has a hijabi sister there.
you're
I'm not sure of that.
at?
But anyway, yeah, no, I started my career at Microsoft. I spent first 5 years at Microsoft building Windows Mobile, Office Mobile, really. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel. I have some patents from them, which my patents cubes are sitting over there.
Mm,
Uh, and then I moved on to Microsoft, bought a healthcare startup based out of Washington D.C. So I moved to DC to try to build healthcare solutions that Microsoft ended up getting out of. And that's when I moved back to Canada. I worked remotely for Microsoft for a bit, and then I spent the next 5 years at Amazon building their last mile and fulfillment business. So if you get 1 day delivery or same day delivery, a part of that was contributions of my team at
mm,
Amazon. I left
wow.
Amazon last year to do Campaign Raven, which is what I'm working on right now. It's COVID-19 is an interesting time to start a business. So I hadn't, if I knew COVID-19 was happening, I probably would have delayed it by a year or so. But it is what it is, right?
Mm. So, what is this new system that you have developed? Campaign Raven. What does it do for? I mean, your target market is not for profits, from what I understand.
Yeah.
It's a
So I mean,
CRM.
right at a high level, right? If you look at a lot of nonprofits or even political campaigns, you use a bunch of different tools. You might use an email marketing tool. You might use something else to collect donations. You might use a different tool to gather information. You might use a different CRM system altogether. So large nonprofits, say United Way, they can kind of farm out. They might use Salesforce. They might use Mailchimp. They can manage that. But smaller nonprofits or political campaigns, that's not something they can afford. And so the idea was to have a single one-stop CRM where you can collect donations, where you can send email marketing, where you can get to know your network better. So you can organize your volunteers, you can organize your donors. It's basically one stop all, because that way the more you use a system, the richer your data gets. And then you
Mm,
can make predictions. You can do things like, who should I send an email
analytics.
to get a monthly $10 donation versus who should I contact to get a $10,000 donation? Or if you're a political campaigner, who should I message to get them to volunteer and not send them donation email because they're not going to
Mm,
donate, but they're going to volunteer. So I use artificial intelligence to make predictions about people in your network that you can then use to feed it back into the system and just get smarter about how you run your nonprofit.
Wow,
And I
that's
specifically
awesome.
want to
So,
target nonprofit because my goal is not to. I mean, businesses have a lot of venues, they have a lot of solutions, they have a lot of consultants. It's just nonprofit that I feel is really ignored. Where even the solutions are out there, like say Salesforce, are things that were designed for a for profit for selling, and they kind of just threw in nonprofit to find this
hmm.
market they can make some more money out of. But my goal is to enable nonprofits to become a lot more successful than they are.
Hmm. So, where can people find out more about this niche service or product that you have developed? I mean, how can not-for-profits access your service and learn more about it and see, if this is the right thing for them?
You know what? Honestly, look me up. Send me a message. I'll hook you up with a coupon so you can use it for free for a year, let's say, and you can take 12 months to decide if it works for you or not.
Hmm.
So find a way to contact me. I'm pretty Googleable, so just Google
Yeah.
my name. I'll come up. Send me a message using any venue you want, and we'll talk.
Oh, cool. Very good. That's great. I know you're an avid reader. Apparently, you read 50 nonfiction books per year. And so I wanted to know what kind of books do you read? And are there any recommendations of maybe some latest books that you have come across that you may recommend to our viewers?
That's a good one, actually. That will be a hard one to answer. So I read books from all sort of genre. I stopped reading fiction about, I would say, 15 years ago. I just got out of it, and I just never
Hmm.
got back into reading fiction. But nonfiction, I read a lot. Right now, I just finished Jonathan A.C. Brown's. I think it's called Hadith: Muhammad's Legacy in the Modern World. That I just finished reading, and the book I read before that is actually a pretty thick random textbook style. It's called Oxford's History of. I can't even remember what it was, but essentially a history of development of Islamic theology. And it's an issue I've always been curious about, and it's not something that's a lot been written on in English. There's a lot of
Hmm.
material in Arabic, but there's not a lot of
Yes.
material in English. And this is one of the very rare occurrences of a book that got translated into Arabic from English.
Hmm.
It's a remarkable book, and right now I'm reading Malcolm X's biography, which is something surprisingly and a shame. I'm kind of ashamed to admit I had never actually read it. Watched
And
the
you can never
movie,
go
I
wrong
heard a
with
lot
it.
about it,
Yeah.
but yeah. So I'm reading it right now. That's my reading material right this second.
Great. Good. You never know. Somebody may pick up one of these books and go with it. That's great.
Yeah, check it out, man. If you ever want to discuss books, send me a message. We'll do a virtual book club because I tend to sometimes I read stuff that really nobody else has read because I find so I'll read a book, I'll look at the bibliography, I'll find one reference that they made to a different book, I'll
Hmm.
get that book. Sometimes I'll contact the author. I recently read Jasir Aura's I can't remember the title right now. It just escaped.
Hmm. Okay. Um, okay. Let's see if you are back on. Yes, I think you're back on. That's great. So, well, we'll be concluding in a couple of minutes, few minutes. I wanted to actually discuss an interesting tweet that I recently saw, and I'll quote: "It's easy to use speech in a way that avoids dealing with controversy because it pays off in short term. However, leaders should be content with a conflict that happens when you speak the truth in a straightforward manner because it produces long-term peace." I found this quite intriguing, and I wanted to know what's behind this tweet, and more importantly, really, what can you expand on this statement, and what do you mean by this? Because you're in a leadership position, and there are many, of course, leaders, hopefully, who will be watching this show. I thought that this is, or aspiring leaders, of course, and knowing the state of the world, that is run by leaders, it'll be important for us to actually hear this. This is a very interesting statement.
I'm back. Okay, so I used to lead Jima khutbahs, and I did a khutbah on social harmony. How focusing on social harmony is absolutely the wrong thing because you always have this issue every time a controversy comes in, and you'll find that when people speak up, there are people in our community that go with, what, don't divide the community, right? Don't talk about this; it will divide the community. Or in Urdu, they'll say "log kya kahenge," or whatever. And I've always, even as a kid, I've never understood that because your guiding principle should be the truth. I mean, what is the truth? And that is what should guide you forward. And if speaking the truth disrupts social harmony, then you know what? To be honest, that's not a social harmony anyway. That's fake. So my, if I were to word my philosophy in a way, I would say that when it comes to doing the right thing versus doing the easy thing, always do the right thing, because the
Mm,
easy thing is good in the short term, but if you want to improve your society, if you want to improve yourself, if you want to be a better human being, if you want to be a better person, you always have to do the right thing. And that's what it comes down to. So I was really thinking about it recently in Black Lives Matter, and then we had Uncle Ijaz Chaudhry issue in Peel. So thinking about that, it becomes easy to take the comfortable position and just not shake things a lot,
mm.
but you really need to shake the system sometimes, which means that it disrupts social harmony in the short term, but that's the only way of fixing the system.
Hmm. That's powerful, especially in the context of social justice. I think that's very, very critical. So thanks for sharing that. What is the next challenge for Councillor Zeeshan Hamid, in your current job or even maybe in life? What is the next big thing you're thinking about?
You know what? At this stage, I'm pretty satisfied and happy where I am. Alhamdulillah. I'm fortunate to find myself in a position, and I honestly think blessed. I'm blessed to find myself in a position where I can give back, where I have power over very small things, but I do have some authority over things that help people. And my hope is that I use that authority in the good way and the right way. But
Hmm.
that's where I am. That's where my focus is right now. Who knows what happens in the future? We'll see.
Hmm. Alhamdulillah, that's great. Um, Looking back at your life, especially last 10 years, but I would say last 15 to 20 years, your journey into politics and beyond. I have two questions. One is, what are some key obstacles that you faced? Not just politics only. I'm just talking about life that were good lessons for your life and teaching moments for you. What were some of those obstacles you faced that you overcame and you felt that, what, if I did not experience this, I probably wouldn't be where I am today?
Okay, so this is going back to high school. We're in high school. My friend and I are walking through Square One, and I won't share the name of the store, but there's a store there, and there's this. I don't even know how old she was. There's a sales lady, and my friend looks at me and say, "You know what? If you just go up to her and ask her what time it is, just that's all you have to do. Ask her what time it is. I'll give you $5." And $5 was a lot of money for me back.
Oh.
I'm back. That's when I decided that I needed to work on. It took me a
Mm.
while, and I ended up finding Toastmasters. I joined Toastmasters. I worked on my speech. I worked on my confidence. I ended up running Milton Toastmasters. I ended up becoming area governor for a while. And I think if I hadn't done that, if I hadn't gotten over my shyness, if I hadn't developed confidence, I would not have done anything in life. I mean, forget politics. I would not be successful in my private tech career either,
Mm.
because confidence and being able to speak and being able to articulate your thoughts, being able to think of something and put them in words in a way that it gets across, that's actually a very, very, very powerful thing. And if I
Mm.
could give one advice to parents, that would be to work on your kids' confidence, teach them how to speak, teach them how to convey their thoughts, and encourage them to express themselves. Because that's something that no matter which field they go in, that will make a world of difference.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think one lesson I learned from this is that, never underestimate the fact that somebody in your life pushes you to do something and you never know where it takes you, right? I mean, just that one story of somebody just pushing you to go up to somebody and speak and do something, mashallah, landed you a career of, 10-year plus. Of course, that's not the only story behind it, but there's so much more that will happen that led you on this journey. So that's powerful. Thanks for sharing this. Um, the second question related to this is, um, can we, as we conclude, um, what advice do you give to future and aspiring uh, politicians in the Canadian community, among Canadian youth, Canadian Muslim youth, and I would say more specifically the racialized youth. who are coming from minority communities, what advice, based on your own experience, would you give them today that they should be doing today so they can build on, build on their successes to hopefully contribute in somewhere in politics going forward?
Yeah. My general advice, as we talked about earlier as well, is to get involved. Just get involved somewhere. We're fortunate enough to live in a country where there are so many ways to build a successful career in politics. We often think about just politicians. We often think about just people who run for elections. But behind every elected person, especially federally and provincially, there's an army of people. There's an army of staffers that work for them. You can be involved there, and honestly, the real power is there anyway. You can be involved in writing policies. You can be involved in different ministries. So there are a lot of ways of getting involved. Don't worry about the full path. I think sometimes people try to figure out 10 steps ahead, and then it freezes them. Just look at what can you do next. What can you do today that you didn't do yesterday? Take small steps. My advice to the older generation, especially the older generation that wasn't born here, is to it's let the youth come forward, step aside. I know it's a controversial advice, I've said that before, but step aside, guide the youth, teach them, mentor them. But you know what, it's their time. They are the ones that will run this country one day, so bring them up. Just give them space, let them grow. My general advice to you that I typically give is threefold. I mean, there are three things that have been guiding principles in my life that have always been helpful. The first thing is, no matter what people's role in life, everyone deserves your respect. That's something I learned the hard way. Sometimes, especially some of the cultures that Muslims come from, there's a huge hierarchy, right? We respect people higher up in a hierarchy a lot more than we respect people at the bottom. A lot of Eastern cultures are very hierarchical. And I think we need to give it to that. Like, everyone deserves your respect. The second thing that has always helped me is assume the person you're talking to has something to teach you. So no matter what they do, they have some wisdom that you don't. There's something you can learn from them. And the third, as we mentioned, when it comes to doing the easy thing versus the right thing, always do the right thing. It will be uncomfortable the short term, because speaking the truth is hard. Being straightforward is hard. So in the short term, it might even create conflict. It will be uncomfortable, but in the long run, it will always work out. So as long as you follow these three things, they have been the guiding principle for me, and they've always served me well. So as long as you're doing these three things, I think you'll find yourself successful in any field you go to. And read a lot, learn a lot. Cut back on TV time, cut back on social media, and read a lot.
Well, that's great. This is actually very good. Actually, this was my last question to you. Actually, if you wanted to share three things from your life lessons, basically, and I think you covered it all. You've done a great job of sharing and summarizing a lot of your life and successes in this interview. So thank you very much for sharing a part of your day, of course, with us as a counselor, but also part of your life with us. And I hope this will inspire not only, of course, a new generation of people who are going to be active, inshallah, in politics and other forms of civic engagement, but also inspire Canadians and Canadian Muslims at large to give back, to give more, to contribute, start to look into their, take a stock of their talents and see how they can actually give back to the community in ways that is only really possible for them, because everybody's unique. Everybody has got unique talents, and everybody has something powerful and different to offer to make a mark, leave a mark, and leave a legacy, inshallah. So I hope we can all learn from your story and legacy. So once again, thank you, Councillor Zeeshan Hamid. We hope to see you more often on these shows and talk about other topics as well, and learn from a lot of the wisdom that you just shared with us today.
Thank you for having me. I had a lot of fun. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. We look forward to seeing you, as I said, more often. So, well, with that, we're going to have to end our show, and wanted to also thank our viewers today for their engagement, for their comments, and also to our production team. They have been working as usual very hard to bring such shows to light. We have Muslim change makers like Zeeshan Hamid, and others whom we have featured every week. We bring to you. So we thank them for being there with us and for inspiring us in ways that he did actually today. Also wanted to thank Dawanet for its marketing partnership, torontomuslim.com and Dawanet for their assistance. Once again, this is Taha Ghayur, your host on Canada Today, and we look forward to seeing you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.